Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahi Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Oh, may that one protect us both. May he nourish us both. May he give vigor to us. May he also invigorate our studies. May we not cavil. Peace, peace, peace beyond all. Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanara Mardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagatgurum. We salute Krishna, son of Vasudeva, destroyer of Kamsa and Chanura, and the supreme delight of Devaki, the Lord God himself, Lord of the entire universe, and also Guru of the entire universe. So we normally start with questions. So there being no questions, we can we can revise a little bit of some of what we covered in chapter 10 from last week. And one of the areas we left off, we actually combined two stanzas, 4 and 5. The 10th chapter is called Vibhuti Yoga. A glimpse, if you like, of the divine manifestations of the Lord that leads us to a sense of unity. It's a very easy route, because if you understand the principle of it, that the origin is only one, then you'll also understand that there can be, that any point you take, any manifested point that you can take, can lead you step by step to a blissful base, the origin. And so on Sunday we covered some of pranayama, and the week before, and we were following Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. And the Swami makes a great point about pranayama because he reminds us that according to the yogic and Vedanta traditions, the whole of what we observe, that science has divided into energy and matter, comes back to a global energy and a global matter. Global matter we call Agasha. Global energy we call Prana. One acting on the other and combining creates all these variations, starting from something very simple and generalized to something that is increasingly more detailed and complex. And one of the things that we briefly discussed on Sunday was how compatible is this with modern science? And what's the relevancy here to chapter 10? Well, the relevancy is that chapter 10 is designed to draw you firstly to an origin, one thing. And if we can draw ourselves to one thing in every sense, in every level, and then draw us out, as it were, like breathing in and breathing out, draw us out to all the glorious manifestations everywhere, then we have the opportunity to go back inwards. And is this not, after all, meditation? Perhaps with eyes open. Meditation with eyes open, we walk around, as it were, with ears open, eyes open, and so on. And whatever we observe, whatever sensation comes to us, we can catch it. And we can explore and discover, first of all, its beauty, and then its inner beauty. And when we discover its inwardness, there we have discovered the Lord of the universe, this one entity without a second. And so it's useful to see what all this universe is made from, as opposed to what we think it's made from. And we'll find this very, very useful, because it will inspire us. Every experience of the outer world will inspire us, particularly if these terms, outer and inner, go away. Just act there as convenience terms. So Swami Vivekananda has this to say. I just selected one small passage here from his Raja Yoga. He says at the beginning and the end of a cycle, everything becomes Akasha, and all the forces that are in the universe resolve back into the prana. In the next cycle, out of this prana is evolved everything that we call energy, everything that we call force, is the prana that is manifesting as motion. It is the prana that is manifesting as gravitation, magnetism. It is the prana that is manifesting as the actions of the body, as the nerve currents, as thought force. From thought down to the lowest force, the old language for energy, everything is but the manifestation of prana. The sum total of all forces in the universe, mental or physical, when resolved back to their original state, is called prana. When there was neither ought nor not, he's quoting from the Nasindhya. When darkness was covering darkness, what existed then? That Akasha existed, that unmanifest potentiality existed, without moving. The physical motion of the prana was stopped, but it existed all the same. And so he has a beautiful way of expressing that what you call me, you, sun, moon, whatever point you register, is nothing more than a small eddy or a small vibration, if you like, of a cosmic vibration somewhere. Just happened to be caught, like a whirlpool. We can imagine water running and caught in a small whirlpool. Something interrupts, a small whirlpool is there, and then it moves on. Our human body, human life, is just that small whirlpool that moves on. And we exaggerate that and say, oh, my life is so important, or my life is a tragedy. Of course, most lives are a tragedy, comedy, with a lot of singing and dancing, and we take it very seriously. So, just to remind you, the Lord tells us that he is, in fact, unborn and beginningless, not a historical figure. That's just a manifested form around for a moment, until, of course, Krishna takes an arrow in his vulnerable point, the ankle, and then he also is gone. He, as a historical entity, is gone. But he's beginningless. The great Lord of all the worlds, he among mortals is undiluted and freed from all sins. Right? Whether done deliberately or not, consciously or unconsciously. Unconsciously means we have a habit towards something. Consciously means we exercise the will to go in a certain counter direction to anything that disrupts ultimately in the long run, or even in the short term, our harmony. So there are certain aspects, just to remind you, buddhi, intellect is mentioned, jnana, wisdom is mentioned, asamoha, non-illusion is mentioned, forgiveness is mentioned, truth is mentioned, self-restraint is mentioned, calmness is mentioned, happiness is mentioned, dukkam, pain is mentioned, birth is mentioned, non-existence is mentioned, fear is mentioned, and fearlessness also is mentioned. All these are mentioned in this fourth stanza. And what it means, of course, is that whatever emotion comes up in the mental field, we can attribute it not to the mind, not to ourselves, but to the Lord himself who sits within, who doesn't arbitrate, doesn't judge. So all these other things, just to remind you what else we covered, we said that ahimsa, samatha, susti, tapo, dhanam, yasso, yashaha, that non-injury, equanimity, contentment, austerity, charity, fame, and the lack of fame also, these different qualities of beings arise from me alone. There's no judgment in it. There's no valuation of what is good, what is bad. We find an echo of this in the Kathopanishad. A question is asked, ayatra dharmad, ayatra dharmad. What is that which is beyond these two opposites, good and bad, or virtue and vice, and also their consequences, the result, and also past, present, and future. That means the whole of time. What is beyond space, what is beyond time is asked. Tell me of that thing which you see as different from these things. Virtue different from vice, different from this cause and effect, and different from past and future. That is, tell me something deeper than these human-made and human-judged values, moral values. After all, it's in a way subjective. If you ask, for example, a snake, why do you carry poison around? Doesn't it harm you? A snake will say, it doesn't harm me, but it will harm you. So as an example of, is it good, is it bad? It depends from which point of view you're looking at it. From the snake's point of view, it's quite fine. But from the victim's point of view, it's a bit difficult. We exhale carbon dioxide. Inhaling carbon dioxide for human beings is very difficult. We're not designed to inhale carbon dioxide. Nor, by the way, are we designed to digest carbon dioxide that is contained in such drinks as, I won't tell you the brand names, carbonated drinks. We're designed to breathe in a certain proportion of oxygen, well mixed with nitrogen and other things, and we thrive on that. But of course, oxygen, other entities don't want. Plants don't want it directly in this form, as a gas form. And so they give a beautiful, useful exchange. They manufacture all the carbohydrates and so on, and they exhale, as it were, the oxygen, and we huff and puff on it, and chew and munch on the carbohydrates, and we're quite happy. And we give off the carbon dioxide, and the plant is quite happy. The sun shines, and its radiance shines everywhere. It doesn't worry, it doesn't ask, am I shining on somebody who is morally good today or bad today? No judgment like that occurs. And so we have this whole idea, in a crude form of religion, sometimes, a good starting point, that God is a judge. But we can't stop there, because a child requires, when it's growing up, certain incentives. It requires short-term motivational incentives. Reward and punishment is one. The highlighting of what is good behavior, bad behavior, and the commensurate reward or punishment that goes with it. But as a child grows older, these are no longer required. So in the same way, as religion develops and matures into an inner spiritual journey, a search for the inner meaning, something that is beyond these things of good and bad, then something opens up and yields. And so, who are they that have been the vehicles for the abundant expression of the glories of this Lord Ishvara? And so we find where we left off last week. Maharshayaha supta purve chutvaro manavastata madbhava manasa jata yesham loka imaha prajaha. The great rishis, 7 great rishis. Now, if you look up into if you're interested in astronomy, you might notice what is called the Great Bear. Structure of 7 stars are there. And so, somebody looked at that and thought, how does this universe arise from one single cosmic mind? Bear in mind, we don't have the issue of a creator separate from the creation. From himself it comes, from itself it comes. Any examples like that? Yes. A spider weaves a web from itself. It doesn't require a Mrs. Spider. Or a second-hand shop where materials can be sourced. And then you manufacture that. Because that creates an ad infinitum problem, and while it may be very good for theology, it's not good philosophy. So the interpretation of these 7 great rishis can be 7 different layers or levels of consciousness, could be, or 7 spheres of consciousness. And then, of course, there are 4 ancient, and the 4 ancient Manus. So all of that is mentioned. The ones that go before are Kumaras, that is kind of arbitrators, 4 of them, commanding various sections of time, if you will. And of course Manus are doing the same thing. Everything divided up into various sections, very elaborately put out in the tradition. For our purposes, all we need to know is that there is a progressive evolution or unfolding from one source. We call this cosmic mind. Very clear that throughout the philosophy, what appears as in the microcosmic world will appear in the macrocosmic world. We don't have to examine every grain of sand to understand what the universe is. We can simply take this biological unit and do our exploration. And when we go beyond this biological unit, we find there is some psychical unit, some psyche, some mind, some energetic sense, some mind sense, some intellect, some entity that is there and remains in a dreamless sleep. And then ultimately we find that which never changes, that is unborn, as mentioned, and never changes. So there's a gradual progression that we should understand. A personalized gradual progression. We can personalize it if we want. All the forces of the universe. If you take the cosmology of the Big Bang, you can visualize it something like that. From something simple, and then a great expansion. And then from that, so many different things coming, including potential energy as gravitational pull, and then the great gravitational pull of that creates a kind of kinetic energy, that creates a radiational energy, that creates electromagnetism, and strong and weak nuclear forces. All of that is there. So we can personalize it if we like, but the purport really is to understand there is this gradual unfolding. The whole meaning of the word evolution is unfolding. I think I mentioned it before. Something is there already and it's unfolding. We don't need something else to create the universe. And so ultimately the greatest unfolding will be man himself. And from man himself we have the opportunity of releasing, as it were, or manifesting, as it were, the divine within us. And so endowed with my power, we're born of my mind. That's the important thing. So just as the human body has a body, mind, arms, legs, and so on, does the cosmos itself have something like that? Is there such a thing as a cosmic person with arms and legs everywhere? You know, when they talk about galaxies, spiral galaxies, they talk about whirling arms. Our own Milky Way is an example of that, where we have arms and we're on the outer arm of our Milky Way galaxy. So arms and legs everywhere. Is there a central intelligence, a central head? Cosmic mind is there. And from cosmic mind all of these come forth. Let me be many. So, and from them have come forth all the creatures in the world. Now the commentary here mentions the 7 great rishis, Bhrigu, Parichi, Atri, Pudha, Pulastya, Kritu, and Angiras. And the 4 ancient Manus are Svarochisa, Swayambhu, Raivata, and Uttama. These potentates are not of human origin. They are all born of the mind of Brahma, the creator. In other words, they are all personifications of the several phases of the cosmic reality. The 7 great rishis represent the 7 planes of consciousness. They are therefore said to be the originators of beings at all levels of existence and all grades of evolution. How does this help us? It helps us because when we review anything that exists, we now have a plan to go step by step, involved. In other words, the opposite of evolution. We can go backwards. We can go backwards to more and more and more generalizations until we come to a supreme generalization. And Swami Vivekananda in his Raja Yoga comes to a supreme generalization with regards to matter. Now, is there a modern equivalent? Yes. if you keep up to date with physics, the modern equivalent of this is called quantum fields. And quantum fields is a potential jungle and nobody knows what it is. But they know that some energy acts somewhere and creates an agitation. And before you know whether a particle is there or not, it's gone. Such a wonderful play is there. And in previous talks I've likened it to the famous drink, carbonated drink of a black color. We can't advertise things for free here. With a nice foam on the top. See? And bubbles coming up, effervescing and going back. So for that reason, the great scientist John Wheeler called this quantum foam. We see all this bubbling up and returning, a kind of play. And the unknown area is what we call akasha. There's no distinguishing characteristics in it. And an unknown energy is working on it. And all the manifestations of energy come down to that one point. In that same way, all manifestations of matter come down to that one central point. And both of them come from one central point, which we call cosmic mind. That's the order of progression. And so there's great benefit for the spiritual devotee from knowing the structure of the cosmos and its orderly functioning too. Orderly functioning means this, what's called the anthropic principle. Today people are wondering and trying to find out the answer. When you look at the physical world, you'll find various factors, various fundamental laws, various constants. And those people who are promoting, we mentioned last week, a thing called intelligent design, are trying to find out, you see, is this not design? And those people who are materialist reductionists are fighting it tooth and nail and saying, no, it can't be design. It has to be random, since random is our fundamental operational principle. And so for that reason, we'll invent trillions and trillions and trillions of universes. Don't worry, you can't see them, because in a game of chance, one of them will arrive here with all the right conditions. But any sensible thinking person will see, admire, and get an internal elevation about the wonderful orderliness of everything. You don't have to look very far. Look at the organization in your own body. See how everything is well designed. You know, a teardrop is effective as a germ killer. It contains what? Lysol. It's effective as a germ killer even if it's diluted in 20 liters of water. And there are cilia there. If any germ gets past, a whole battery of cilia are there. Some coughing is there. No foreign material is allowed beyond there. And if it is, then hydrochloric acid sits in the stomach. And look at the arrangement of all the antibodies in the human body. See how well it is arranged. See whatever you feed in gets digested. When we eat, we say Brahmapanam, Brahmahavi, and so on. See, bearing in mind that is the law of the universe. There's not only all these ingredients and components, but the digestive capacity too, the inner digestive fire. If we really understood this, we'd be quite careful what we put into the fire. You know, when we have a havan, and people just carelessly put something into the fire, not understanding that it's become the Lord's mouth. You should take care what you feed and how you feed it when you say Swaha. So in that same way, this is the same thing. The inner digestive fire. I digest your food. So the inner digestive fire is there. We shouldn't maybe douse it out with ice cream or something. Knowing this, being in tune with every aspect of your life and understanding its beauty in its regularity, in its design, and relating this as a mere sample of the entire universe. Seeing how the arrangement of the universe is, seeing how from this great, great, vast existence of mainly hydrogen and helium, plus the element of falling called gravity, we have all of this that we have here today. so many, supposed to be so many billions of years. 13.78 billion years is the latest calculation. But about 14 billion. They have to arrange the Hubble's constant so that the thing that we observe is not older than the universe. So when we look at nature, we're looking at signposts everywhere. Do you recognize me? Can you trace this back? And for that reason we can take any sample we like. There's a beautiful poem by Wordsworth. I have learned, he says, to look on nature, not as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing oft times the still sad music of humanity. Nor harsh nor grating, though of ample power, to chasten and to subdue, and I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, and the round ocean and the living air, and the blue sky, and in the mind of man, emotion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things. Therefore am I still a lover of the meadows and the woods and mountains, and of all that we behold from this green earth, of all the mighty world, of eye and ear, both what they half create, and what perceive, well pleased to recognize, in nature and the language of the sense, the anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart and soul, of all my moral being. William Wordsworth expresses the beauty that we have in nature, and the wonder and awe, and the unexplained portions that we're happy to leave unexplained. Just accepting it. Not blind acceptance, of course. So I often say, when you see a beautiful scene, such as a sunrise or a sunset, there's no desire to capture it and put it in your pocket, or make it change. Oh, the Lord made a mistake. It should have been a bit more mauve here, a little bit more pink there. No, we just stand enthralled and accept the beauty, and something resonates in us to say, Lord, this is beautiful. Nothing more than that. No personal reward sought, just the opportunity to stand in wonder and thankfulness. That's all. And the more we do that, and the more we cultivate that, the closer we are to this beautiful truth that is ultimately displayed in vibhuti. Itam vibhutim yogam cha mama yo viti tattataha so vikampena yogena yojate natra samshaya. He who knows in truth this glory that we find everywhere, and power, because the glory is there, manifested in the forms of matter. The power is there, manifested as the thing that moves. We can call it Shakti, we can call it Prana. In Raja Yoga, it's termed Prana. Is endowed with unfaltering yoga, if you know this. Unfaltering concentration, unfaltering revelation, unfaltering tunement. Of this, there's no doubt, as if we were told, even if you doubt it, I can give you this assurance. There's no doubt about it. What are you looking for? You're looking for unfaltering steadiness in mind. Not a haphazard thing. Not something that comes and goes. Not something that has extremes, up here, down there. But something that has a steadiness to it. Unfaltering yoga. Something that never fails. There's a commentary here also. Electricity manifests itself in various forms in instruments suited to those forms. In whatever form this energy expresses itself, the power is the same. And this is a specimen of the primordial power of the Lord, evolving itself into the glorious varieties of the sentient and the insentient, abounding in nature. Now, if you have some discernment, the discerning person knows that whatever he senses is the power and glory of one entity, Ishvara. He cannot therefore be any more separate from Ishvara than he can be separate from earth. His yoga with God is thereby made unfaltering. So you see, we find this everywhere. There was a time when people understood that even a rock has some sentiency. Now we kick a rock and it doesn't seem to care. But internally, of course, all the electrons, all the molecules are jostling. Our foot cares, of course, depends on how hard we kick it. So, kick the rock carelessly, and the foot's vibrating, and maybe there's a swelling if you hit it very hard, and the rock seems to be unaffected. But actually, something is there. Now, supposing we say that all this is insentient, then please explain to me how you put a rock or a weight on a plumb line, something that is apparently inert and dead, and put it on a string. It's called a plumb line. And it knows where the center of the earth is. Don't tell me it doesn't know where the center of the earth is. But we've gotten used to dismissing the entire universe as something that is essentially non-sentient, has no particular life in it, does not have these two elements of subtle matter and subtle energy in it. Because electrons are there, quarks are there, and everything, rock or otherwise, is nothing more than quantum field. But how is it that it looks like this? It looks like this because our instrumentation is like that. It brings us to this point. It looks like that because the rate of that vibration matches the recipient instruments that are designed to catch that particular vibrational level, what we might call wavelength, what we might call also frequency. We have instruments designed to catch that. So, it depends how you view things. Somebody once gave somebody a challenge. Can you please give me a number of words in a series, rapidly, as quickly as you can, that do not contain the letters A, B, C. Even other letters are not there. And you can even have a friendly bet about it. The person will be stymied there on to think about this. And the answer is very simple. You can make 50 or more words that do not have any A, B, and C in it. You want to know what it is? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can count as many numbers as you like, up to 50, and none of them contain A, B, or C. Yeah? Interesting. So if you have spare time on your hands and you want to have a challenge, just a social bit of fun, you can use that. So things look different depending on how you are able to shift, and it's easy to shift your position very, very quickly. Sri Ramakrishna has this to say: a lamp cannot burn without oil. Even so, man cannot be bereft of God. You take God away, then you have insensity, if there can be ever such a thing. The fact is that life is God, and God manifests life. Aham sarvasya prabhava mataha sarvam pravadati iti matva bhajanti mam bhuta bhava samandidha. That is, I am the origin of all. There it is. From me all things evolve. The wise know this and adore me with all their heart. Why wouldn't you? If you knew that that entity was the origin of everything, that you have the opportunity of picking up any sample you want, and bringing it back to this blissful base of the Lord. Why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you make yourself and the mind blissful? Why wouldn't you illumine the mind and keep it happy and joyful? It's because we don't really understand this principle. We have to be reminded of it constantly. And this is the import of teachers, scriptures, etc. It's merely reminding you of a fact that intrinsically you know, by virtue of claiming, I exist. As soon as you say, I exist, you are acknowledging existence itself. Nobody can think of themselves as non-existent. You can't imagine yourself dead, physically. Somebody says, no, I dreamt I was dead. Oh, I see. And who was the onlooker? No, there was, you see, I dreamt that Swami Purnananda was dead. He was on a slab. Oh, I see. And who was the bodiless eyes that viewed it? I don't know. But Swami Purnananda was definitely dead. I poked him and he was cold as ice. But who was the one that was viewing it? So this question of death, you can't even imagine it. Our existence and our assertion, our inner feeling about it is so persistent. So is there any evidence that we can trace everything back to this origin? Well, yes. You see, because of this mixed up position, that everything is a mixture of this one substance and name and form. Everything is mixed up, as it were, and therefore we're bound to see expressions of this. So just to remind you also, when we gave the Enneagram course, we mentioned and emphasized these three elements, light, life and love. Supposing you say that pure existence is Saturating Ananda, existence, consciousness and bliss, it explains why we feel so strongly that we should be existent. It explains why there should be intelligence and orderliness. It explains why there's an anthropic principle there. Anthropic means that everything is so finely tuned, if you will, that every step requires a preceding step, and the margin for error is almost nothing. If you upset one small, tiny thing, gravitational constant, for example, then the whole thing goes, it all falls to pieces. So from me, all things evolve, and we have to understand, and I've mentioned it before, but it's worth repeating. Standard picture of evolution is something like a tree with branches everywhere. But it's much easier to think of things like a flow. Patanjali Yoga Sutras tells us that good and bad deeds are not the direct cause of the transformations, and commentators explain what this means. Imagine now that we're taking a vast river that starts off as a very, very small spring or a melting snow somewhere. And as it falls from gravity, it gains momentum and gains volume. By the time it comes down to a plain, it's now a surging river. Maybe narrower than it is as it moves on, because as it moves on, it becomes a catchment area and other waterfalls and increases the volume and other rivers join it. By the time it gets nearer to the sea, it's a vast, vast river, maybe 1 kilometer in width or more, starting off from a small area. But even where it started from, it was water. And where it ends up, it's still water. And you can't say which water is better than the other water. Water is water, chemically H2O, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, no matter where you measure it. Chemically, it's all the same. Same water is there. Same substance is there. So is this a kind of evolution? And the commentators on that particular sutra, Patanjali says, you see, it's like a farmer who wants to bring water to his field. So he has a kind of reservoir, and what's inhibiting is he puts channels with gates on. Now you can elaborate the example as much as you want. In Zimbabwe we have a very great lake called Kariba. They think it's one of the largest man-made lakes in the world. And the huge, huge dam wall there with gates, floodgates. Now supposing you decide that life is a struggle and your goal is to transfer the water from one side to the other. Of course, I'm going to exaggerate the example. You can be issued with a teaspoon, saying, I'm only a small person, I'm a very insignificant person, like a worm or something, so only give me a small teaspoon, and I'll transfer water from one side to the other laboriously. You'll never finish it, because the volume of the lake is huge. You can stand in the middle of the lake or be in a boat in the middle of the lake, and you look out left, right, north, south, east, west, you won't find any land beyond the horizon. Such a vast lake it is. It's much easier to open the floodgates. Then vast volumes of water will flow through by itself, easily and naturally. Supposing then the evolutionary process, the natural flow, that is, the law of the universe, flowing as it were, to find itself as it were. I say as it were because it is always itself and the Lord always knows it. But from our point of view, it looks like an evolution in time. It looks like something flowing. And sometimes it'll get caught, and there'll be a small eddy somewhere, and a small shallow pool somewhere, and it'll take a long, long time for some force to disrupt it, to displace it, and allow it to move on. But there's a general momentum. There's a general momentum because it's a will to unfold, and that forces the movement onward. And water has this characteristic. It will always find the easy route round. It doesn't matter what the obstacle is. Water is fluid enough to be present everywhere. So it finds its easy way around and flows on. Nothing can stop its flow until it gets to the sea. And if we can imagine, and these are passages that support it, like so many rivers flowing to the sea and so on. So, all flowing to the sea. And the advantage of this analogy is, look how vast the ocean is. How vast, for example, the Pacific Ocean is. The depth is still unknown. This vast depth which is silent, quiet and profound at its deepest point. And all turbulent on the surface. This is really evolution. It's this transformation of species because obstacles get removed. In spiritual life, we have the opportunity to remove obstacles. Soon we'll have Ganesha Chaturthi. The Lord is a remover of obstacles. The prayer to Ganesha happens first because you want to remove the obstacles. The Lord of all creatures will happily move all the obstacles for the devotee. So the first point is, let us have all the obstacles removed, meaning there's nothing to gain. It's already there, already full and free. It just requires expression. And the highest expression then will be a God-man or a God-woman if we want to be gender sensitive. Some God comes out. So Vivekananda points this out. He says, when one obstacle is removed, when the mammal obstacle, for example, is removed, then man comes out. And when the man obstacle is removed, God comes out. This is the evolutionary process. So he says, I am the origin of all, and from me all these evolve, unfold, come. You don't require a second entity to make this. It comes from me and goes back to me. And those people who really know this, who really understand it, that is the wise, know this, naturally, as a result, they adore me. How? They adore me with great concentration, with great meditation, with great absorption, we can say with all their heart. The one standard thing in theistic religions is that you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength. When Jesus was asked, what should I do? What is the greatest commandment? He tells it, this is the only really one commandment. From the others just flow, they are subsidiaries. That thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy soul, all thy mind, and so on. So what is our obstacle? Our obstacle is that we take the energy that could go toward that, all our energy, we take that and we disperse it everywhere. We dissipate it. And for every dissipation will become a delaying factor. Every dissipation is a delaying factor. So it's up to us how we want to delay or accelerate our evolution. And so, right on cue, the commentator here, which is Swami Purnananda, says, the farmer who wants to bring up robust plants gives all his attention to the soil, it being the basis of good cultivation. The wise in this way give their mind to God, knowing that He is the source of everything, and that the thought of Him alone enriches and ennobles the mind. Their attention does not on any account deviate from God. As the plant gets itself rooted in the earth, the yogi gets himself attached to the Almighty, and that is the unfaltering yoga. Now, the beauty about this kind of bhakti yoga and this kind of approach in looking for all the glories is that we have an easy route toward it, because we don't have to laboriously cultivate this attention and this concentration and so on. If we fully understand that every part of this glory is traceable back to the origin, and go a little further, logically, if we can trace it step by step, just as water that starts from a spring and ends up in the ocean is the same water, we'll also register that all the manifestations is that Lord Himself. And that is why we find this kind of language there in the Bhagavad Gita, I am. See? I am the taste in water, for example. I am the stability, I am the sun. I am, see? I am the radiance, and so on. I am that. Not that, I'm near that, or like that, or anything like that. No inference of any difference from it. So, the question is there no provision then for the varying temperaments to be drawn Godwards? Can we set out a high ideal, can we have that level of concentration, that level of dedication, taking all our energies and steering it in one direction? Is that entirely possible? Everybody who sits here will say, well, that sounds all very fine, but I woke up this morning and somebody gave me a telephone call and it disturbed my whole day. And somebody else will say, and I went to work and a problem arose and now it's my responsibility to sort it out. And another person will say, oh, I woke up this morning and my knee would not work. And then somebody else might say something else. We have all kinds of difficulties and problems, ranging from physical difficulties to emotional difficulties to problematic challenges that arise from moment to moment. And so, how can you possibly take all this energy and steer it in one direction like this? And the answer is, you fail to notice that that entity arrived as a problem, so-called, arrived as a challenge, arrived as a knee, arrived as a pain, you might even say. And if you view it that way, maybe the pain will go. Zen Buddhism has a great, great technique. When you sit for prolonged hours in meditation, and finally your knee pulls at you and says, hey, come on, I'm now hurting. Their technique is put all your concentration in the knee. Feel how every sensation is coming through that knee. And very soon you'll find that what becomes a distraction, a physical distraction, becomes an area of warmth. And then go one step further. Lord, is this not your knee? Lord, are you not within the blood? Lord, are you not the life force that sits behind it? Lord, is this not one of thousands and thousands of knees? Like that. And now you're on a journey, a meditative journey, that takes you inward to the source. One more then, and we leave this off. So, Machita Madgata Prana Bodhayantaha Parasparam Katayantascha Mam Nityam Tuschanti Cha Lunati Cha. With their minds fixed on me, with their life absorbed in me, and then not just living there, but enlightening each other. You're like common people, have things in common to celebrate. And ever speaking of me, they are contented and delighted. Imagine a party of people enthused with something. What comes to mind is the enthusiasm that people celebrate a political campaign when somebody wins. There's great celebration. If you analyze the behavior of people, there's no logical reason why people jump up in the air. So there's this great celebration that occurs, balloons, bottles are opened, things are drunk, headaches are gotten, all these kinds of things happen. A party atmosphere, but an atmosphere of comradeship, fellowship. We were all aiming for the same thing. And look how beautiful and pleasant we feel. A celebratory atmosphere. And so in this way, people of like mind spiritually, of like experience spiritually, find a kind of comradeship, find a fellow interest, because all of them are so enthused. Any subject that is not orientated toward spiritual experience and the glory of God seems to be so shallow, so diluted, so tainted. No enthusiasm for it. But most people have it the other way around. Most people are enthusiastic about politics. Using that counter example. Most people are enthusiastic about the day-to-day things going on. But these people whose minds are fixed on me, fixed doesn't mean that like fixing the gaze on a candle, not that kind of thing. But fixed in the sense that there's a flowing attention, always attuned. The best thing you can describe it is as a constant attunement. The mind is tuned in, well tuned to that station that we call the Supreme, and is unwilling to deviate. Prior to that, deviation occurred, and effort was used to tune it back. This we call abhyasa, constant practice. So it goes off, we tune it back. Goes off, we tune it back, we tune it back. Then, it never wanders. That's the stage. And at that stage, it never wanders and never will wander. And then you surely have to tell others. So Sri Ramakrishna gives that example of two people who come across this wall, a noise, a celebratory noise being heard on the other side, and one person finds a ladder and gets to the top of the wall and feels so engaged in what's going on. Great party atmosphere is there and so on. So immediately climbs over. Then the other man climbs up. He gets left behind, and he sees the same scene, and he decides, I won't climb over, I need to tell others so they can come along also. Enlightening each other and ever speaking of me, they are contented and delighted. Isn't that what we're looking for? Some contentment, some joy. We get it from inside, not from outside. It's worth reading out this commentary before we finish off. The easiest of all acts for one is to fix one's mind on what one likes the most. I'm never tired of telling a story, and so if you're tired of me telling that story, it doesn't matter. And that is of a certain devotee who said, I was at a concert and it was just amazing. And I said, how long were you there for? He said, 4 hours. And I said, oh, how wonderful your sense of concentration is. He said, I don't understand what you mean. I said, well, to stay there for 4 hours. He says, no, I really enjoyed it. I love the music. So we do have the habit of fixing our mind on something that is enjoyable. And then when we finished, we wondered, where did the time go? We didn't register 4 hours went. Something that is fully enjoyable, we have no problem about fixing our minds on. But because the world is so attractive to the senses, the deeper world is left behind. And when we finally discover the joy of the inner world, the outer world becomes shallow by comparison. And so it's easy at that point to fix the mind of the Lord. Why? Because all his manifestations are attractive when we attribute it to him. Because we see the deeper beauty, the deeper aspect of it. We see the more profound aspect and where it leads to. And when we take that trail, when we take that journey inwards and find, Lord, there you are. What an ecstatic experience. And so when we lead the lives of saints and great people, Ramakrishna, for example, continuously in a state of an ecstatic mood and spreading the joy everywhere. How? By very presence. When I go to India, the whole idea of going, at the time I'm going, is to be on the Kalpataru day, 1st of January, in Delhi. And we can imagine what a beautiful scene that was. And Swami Purnananda painted that scene for us once. And to find a kind of transformation, a kind of glory, visible glory, tangible glory that emanates and touches everywhere, fulfilling people's unspoken wishes. Just all of a sudden, something like a divine light, a divine uplifting feeling, atmosphere being spread and understood by everybody. And we can't help but comparing it and seeing that in other lives we find this capacity for transformation. Here we find it in the 11th chapter. The next chapter on from this we'll find it. And then in the life of Jesus there's an episode of his transformation. And or transfiguration it's called actually. Transfiguration, a transformation that is noticed in the full glory. What we assumed was a man. We ate with him, we drank with him, we slept with him, we conversed with him, we were careless in our talk with him. We sometimes said some things about him behind his back maybe, or laughed or joked. We loved him anyway, but he was just a man. And then the realization dawns, the true nature is there. Arjuna himself had difficulty with it. See, before Vivaswata was and all that, how can that be? You're here. How can you have known all these entities that go back eons? And then the realization dawns. The cosmic mind is there. The child that understands that it's all in all, our mother and father, gets spontaneously absorbed in the parents. The devotee who comes to know that the Lord is the source and stay of himself naturally directs his mind on the Maker. An adult sacrifices his everything in the service of the parents. Nothing is dearer to one than life. The bhakta devotes that life to the Lord. But it is not like the lovers doting on each other, for there is lustful selfishness in their act. The devotee, on the other hand, invites others to share the devotion with them. And we have celebrated Krishna Janmashtami recently, and what comes to my mind is all those beautiful episodes, the episodes with the gopis, the episodes that were there where there was this general exuberance and no trace of lust whatsoever, a different kind of relationship, a different kind of love, and all joyful. Temperamental differences are set aside in this holy act, and the mention of the Lord made to him by the others is delightful. He devotedly recounts his understanding of the Lord to the others, and eagerly receives their experiences and dissertations on the Lord. Repeated recount of his glories does not render them stale or repugnant. Rather, they become increasingly absorbing. Divergent dispositions do, in this divine manner, get commingled in God. Holy communications create contentment and not the frustration which follows indulgence. Ethereal bliss is the fruit of all forms of godly pursuit. And Sri Ramakrishna finishes with this. No picture can be painted on a fresh glass, he says. But if it be coated with the required chemicals, painting on it then becomes possible and effective. Similarly, if man's heart were coated with the chemicals of devotion, the imprinting of the august presence of Ishvara on it becomes easy. So next week we go on to another subject, which is described as Buddhi Yoga. And so for the time being, we leave it off there. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace.